Jill, ask them what they think about Supervillain.
That sounds better to me. More exciting.
Do you prefer saving America? How about saving the world?
Nope. It's saving America.
Hello and welcome back to the third season of Podcast V, Pod Clubhouse's coverage of The Boys as presented by Amazon Prime. I'm joined again with Kat from the Latinx Lens podcast. How are you, Kat?
Good. Happy to be back.
Happy to have you. We most recently podcasted about Snowpiercer. That seems like a distant, far off memory now, even though it was probably like a month ago. And we brought along with us fellow Taylor Inez. How you doing, Inez?
Hi, thank you for letting me join you. What a fun new ride that we're about to embark on here. So appreciate the invite to join you both.
Well, you know, when I told you it's like a superhero show, but completely fucked up, you were like, yes, give me more of that. So
you fucking delivered, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, season 3, we are going to cover the first 3 episodes in this one podcast. We're not going to try to make this an overnighter, but it may run a little long. We want to put out the content so that it matches up with that day 1 drop. Episodes 1, 2, and 3. First one is called Payback. Do you guys catch the titles of the other 2?
Yes, the second one is called The Only Man in the Sky. Episode 3 is Barbary Coast.
I think Only Man in the Sky, that one's pretty obvious what that one's alluding to. It's Homelander thinks he's God. Right? I got that one.
Always.
Got that one. All right, guys, let's pick up with where are we now as we start the third season of The Boys. Let's start with the whole fallout from Stormfront being outed as a Nazi and Homelander getting caught up in the media, the frenzy that came from that. Do you think he did actually love her?
I do. I think that, he had already murdered his one other love person in season 1. And he was totally into her all throughout this last season, as far as I can tell. So, and then our fucked up scene that we walked into in episode 1, where she is in fact still alive. And I think that he did genuinely really love her.
Well,
in his own fucked up way.
And walk up jack off machine. There's that element too.
Oh my God. Yeah. That scene probably made me really notice Seth Rogen's name in the credits. As an executive producer.
I know you're a Preacher fan, and he produced Preacher too.
So yes, Preacher's not like this. No. Preacher's fucked up in his own right in a really amazing way, but this is on a whole other level. And in this universe, and what I know so far about Homelander, being a test tube baby, being homegrown in a laboratory environment, this kind of seems on par with what he would believe is genuine love.
This show likes to poke fun at lots of stuff all at once, and it has to exist alongside our world, which is rife with cancel culture. Now, they don't really address that exactly per se, although they are constantly monitoring popularity numbers and trends and reporting on that, and that in turn motivates the heroes for what they want to do next. Is it a little maybe off that the most powerful man in the world isn't canceled for having a Nazi girlfriend?
Yeah, maybe people didn't want to believe it, or maybe they, because he is a man, maybe it's they sort of oh, it was probably her, she was the Nazi, not him. And in the public's eye, I keep trying to remind myself when watching the show that what we know about them, the public in that world knows about what Homelander is capable of. So in their eyes, he is this wholesome savior kind of hero, that sort of thing. And then Stormfront, probably they've been making her seem like, oh, she just was like manipulative, and he thought it was true love and blah blah. So like when he's going on the circuit trying to explain himself, like I think it would make sense, that they would kind of forgive him, or his approval would be low, but that he wouldn't be canceled. Because why would he be canceled? He fell in love. Everyone falls in love with the wrong person once in a while, like this one was real bad. But I guess it would be more of a question of like, how did you not know? But then, I think it's that universal love thing where people are like, I kind of get it. If they've had an experience like that where the person didn't turn out to be, not a Nazi, but something bad.
Right.
So I feel like that wasn't surprising that they didn't like not forgive him. And then also there's like no one to take his place really, like he is Homelander. And so I feel like there also wasn't someone where it could be like, oh, you did this thing, let's give it to somebody else.
Right, right.
To kind of take that spot, which is, I think, why Vought couldn't do that and like cancel him outright.
That's sort of an unspoken part of cancel culture, right? Is that in all those cases that someone is canceled for either big, real reasons or small, made up in the moment reasons, there is someone that you could just like slot into that quote unquote spot, whether they're an actor, director, a politician, whatever they were. There's more or less some fungible kind of person you can just slot back in to that role for Kevin Spacey. I mean, they did it. Christopher Plummer even won an Oscar for it,
Yeah.
So that's probably a good part of the equation that has to be appreciated that probably isn't stated.
And also, we know that he can basically go and kill everyone if he wanted to, as stated in the 3rd episode.
Right, yeah.
Vought knows they can't really get rid of him, so they had to go on the defensive and let him kind of play this out. Because, he values popularity and love of the people more than anything. So he's doing it willingly in that sense to kind of get that back. But he also could just go on a rampage, as you mentioned. So, yeah. That's also like a big thing that we can't, like, they don't know either.
Oh, we'll
can't get canceled.
We'll try to get to his mentality, but a little bit later. But before that, let's move on to Huey, who seems to be riding high now that he has some semblance of a life assembled. He's working for the Federal Bureau of, Superhuman Affairs, the FBSA, with Congressperson Victoria Newman. And he's got girlfriend Starlight, and that's all working out just fine. Seems like he's in the best place he's ever been in this whole show until he finds out one thing or another. So it's the uncovering that Victoria is, in fact, the head popper from last season that opens up a whole can of worms for this poor guy.
I really liked this stark contrast of who Huey is here in the opener of season 3 versus the Huey that we saw in the opener of season 1, right? Like he was a nobody, just not really respected by like anybody except for maybe his girlfriend. Like not even his dad, I felt like really respected him. And here he is, like just balling it up in a beautiful apartment that is like his place. I thought at first he was rooming it up with Starlight, but no, that's like his spot. Like that's big difference. He's not living with his dad. He's admired by his colleagues at work. Like they whisper like hero stories about him, like of the things that they admire. So I really loved that whole like intro part for him, even though I knew, right, end of season 2, we already knew who the head popper was.
So it's like an interesting contrast then, or maybe it's a foreshadowing or some other kind of metaphor when he can't open the jar and it cuts his hand because he bashes it. It's like he's become impotent again.
Yeah, because he's really frustrated over that. He finally had 1 year, right? He's only had 1 year of like stability. And it's like going away really rapidly.
Mm-hmm. It's like his powers are fading. Another guy whose powers have faded is Billy Butcher, working in his old job for the CIA. His team looks like it's just Frenchie and Kimiko. I don't know if Kimiko is officially on the team, but she does get to hang out with them and works with them. As she later admits, she's just there because Frenchie's there, but still, that's pretty good. Interesting, the dynamic there has shifted. Now, Billy Butcher has to kiss the ring and Huey's wearing it.
Yeah, that was a fun dynamic to see Billy play that out, and it was like, it's not going to last though. Like
Right.
everything just feels odd. Like, you mentioned Huey, and like, he was doing well, and then you're like, but it's the boys. Like, of course that's not going to last. So, and then like I think it was in the second season where we kind of see, second episode, we even see a little semblance of him kind of giving up. Where he was just like, fuck it, I can't do this, because he doesn't have Huey. So it's like we also see him without Huey in a way, like right by his side, like he has had him in the other seasons, but it doesn't last long. So yeah, but I'm excited to kind of see more of the dynamic now that like Huey's on board with the Billy method.
The last situation I wanted to look at impels the beginning of the third season is the American Hero show that they've created to fill the open 2 spots on the 7 vacated by Noir and Stormfront.
The Deep and Stormfront.
No,
Is
it
Noir-
was Deep was already
Noir
gone.
is not on there anymore?
No, it was Noir is I think it was just a passing comment, but they mentioned that he's a vegetable or something, but he's
man.
he's not functional.
Okay, good to know.
When I saw this, I thought this might even be the most cynical look at the idea of superheroics in the boys' world. I mean, using a call-in TV show, or more like a talent reality show to fill the spots of the people who are supposed to be this world's like Justice League members. How did it seem to you guys that they wanted to use like American Idol, but for superheroes?
It felt like that was part of the scheme of kind of making it palatable to everything that happened with Stormfront and Homelander and distracting people. And I mean, I have watched some of the shows, like, the reality shows and stuff, but then it becomes the same over and over again. So I don't really watch those anymore. Like the ones that are like, you become the next, whatever. It
Right.
seems kind of like it's more about the show than actually like, does that person even go on to be
Right.
whatever? Like
Has
it's
a
not
single
even...
winner of The Voice made it on the radio?
I don't know any of them. Yeah, I don't know. And so this one seems like that. Like it's literally just filler to make it exciting, to get like in the popularity of the public, and those people are just going to be fillers. There's not going to be anybody notable that's going to actually have any stake in like any they're just going to be puppets. So
Right, yeah.
but I found it funny though. I was just like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I recently, over the last month, my husband and I have binged Ink Master because I just realized that I have Paramount Plus and all the Ink Masters are on there. And I'm like, oh man, I used to love watching this show all the time. So we've been binging it. I'm like fresh off of watching the last 3 seasons of the show, where it's like pack up your ink and, and close shop is like their phrase or something like that.
That's their what is it? Put out your tiki torch or whatever it is. That's their version.
Right. Right. And so they're like, hang up your cape.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Hang up your
And
cape.
so that, I think that made it like really fucking hilarious to me that this is how they're doing it. But it's also, Kat just said, like totally like what we have to control, like, and manipulate how people feel about this whole mess of a situation and damage control of everything that's like happened. So this is just like a really, like, it's funny and hilarious to us who like know what's happening in the full story. But reality is I feel like there is this a very like real kind of like real life tactic too on, big kind of things. And so I could definitely see it being satirical in just kind of poking fun at the average like American consumer.
Well, and combining that with the lip service Vought, who is apparently behind everything in this universe. They, at their Vought Land or Vought World, whatever the amusement park was, they made sure that the camera pointed out the names of all the various snack stores, like Woke Walk,
LGBT
Yeah.
turkey.
and BLM, BLTs.
Oh my god.
They'll name a sandwich after equal rights, but they won't actually put it into the show because it was never up for discussion, really, adding the women of color to the team. It wasn't, I mean, that didn't get anywhere at all.
It's like when Starlight is saying that, I forgot what her name
Silver
was.
Kincaid, I think, was...
Yeah, Silver Kincaid. And it's like, she's the most qualified. Like, she saved the most. And they're like, that doesn't matter. I was like, oh god. So that was
Yeah.
definitely commentary on, how society works.
Right. There's how society says it wants to work, but then there's how society actually works is I think what they're trying to expose there. All right. Do you have anything else that you guys thought might be foundational for how this show gets, shoved off in the direction it's going to go?
Billy and the kid. I feel like that's going to brew something throughout the season.
Let's hit the old characters catch up. There's a bunch of old characters that have story that have not come into the forefront of the show yet, but they do exist and they are worth mentioning. So as you just mentioned, Ryan is, if you recall, listener, is Becca's son with Homelander. And he has started to develop his powers as shown at the end of last season. He is not on the run, but living in hiding with Colonel Grace. And they move from safe house to safe house in an attempt to stay away from anywhere that Homelander can figure out where they're at. I found it surprising, given the kind of the sign off that Billy gave Ryan at the end of last season. If you recall his advice, it seemed like semi-final. So I was surprised to see that they were actually staying in touch with Zoom calls and stuff. What did you guys think about all that?
I was surprised because of how adamant he's been about his disinterest in being a parent and whatnot, toward the end. And then even like after his wife's passing, the end of season 2, he really just did like, here's a handoff, right? Like I didn't see that in my head as like him taking care of the kid, because he handed off to somebody else to take care of the kid. So I was surprised, and I thought it was really sweet. And I feel like he does have like a genuine like care about it. Maybe his relationship with Huey had something to do with that. It was unexpected, but I don't feel like it is entirely out of character, possibly just because season 2 made a point of showing us that Butcher kind of does have more depth than what he likes to portray.
He's a peculiar guy because he's willing to, on the one hand, he has those feelings, but on the other hand, he's willing to shelve those feelings and say and do horrible things that you wouldn't ordinarily do to or with people with whom you have a loving relationship. In order to keep them safe, he'll say terrible things so that they feel like they want to keep their distance from him. Like at the end of at the end of episode 3, when he makes little Ryan's eyes glow with lasers.
Yeah.
I don't actually think that he felt like he didn't want to look at Ryan anymore. It was that he wanted Ryan to not look at him anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ryan is a puppy because obviously he lost his mom horribly. I mean, he was the responsible for that, and then not on purpose though. And then his dad is Homelander, and so I feel like he's just a ticking time bomb. To be honest, like every time he comes on screen, he makes me nervous, and I know something's gonna happen later. Like I have a feeling with him, Billy. Like I understand he, like Ina said, like he doesn't have that paternal any type of feeling. I think he could if it was a different world, if he had been with Becca, maybe like if he doesn't have to be so rough, but like I think like he in the way he is now, like I don't think he can keep it up. And then with someone like Ryan, like who is so unstable right now, like and is like a super kid and Homelander's kid, like I'm surprised like he wouldn't want to keep it up, because like he could go off and be with Homelander and then Homelander will raise that kid, so like, and then he'll break like kind of his promise to Becca of like, taking care of him. So I don't know what's going through his mind, but one thing, I guess it's sort of a theory, I know it's early, but he was on the V, like he took it. And so I was wondering, like, was that really Billy pushing him away? Because he was saying a lot of weird things in episode 3. Like, I feel like it was out of character for him in some ways. And so I was wondering if that was the side effects of him taking that.
Good question, because there were some side effects of using the drug that were unadvertised. And one of those was that it didn't wear off nearly as fast as they told him it would. There was all the physical withdrawal type stuff, the pain, the barfing, the other stuff. Lots of questions about that, but I didn't even consider the other impact, whether it's pain driven or withdrawal driven, or just the a side effect of the medicine affecting his emotional state. That's a good
Yeah, like a roid
point.
rage type of thing.
Yeah, right.
Because I feel like he said that and then he kind of like stopped and like instead of apologize, like he kind of just let it go. But it felt like he didn't like he wanted to think it more than say it. Maybe that's me reading into it, but I hope that that kind of feels that because it makes sense. Like if you're in roid range or whatever, doesn't that change your emotional state? Like you become more aggressive or other
Yeah.
drugs too, like you change as a person. And then if this is supposed to enhance you, this is just enhancing Billy's, like, you know, he can say really mean things and in a way that hurts. So, but with the kid, I'm sure he kind of would be restrained, but it feels like maybe he couldn't restrain himself from saying what he actually meant because of that.
I hadn't considered that, but totally works. I mean, with just my own our world experience using normal medications that are meant to help you in one way or the other. But if you need to come off that medication or it's not the right medication for you, I can attest to the idea of like irritability or emotional thresholds changing as a result of either using or coming off of a given medication. So good call, Kat. I hadn't even thought of that. Because we have so much to talk about, I'm going to move on to my next character because she's short. Queen Maeve barely even shows up, but interesting that she is a mole for Billy Butcher now. Do you guys have any interest in seeing them continue to expand her story beyond just the no one knows she's a lesbian from last season? or is it just not? We're just not going to get much of Maeve's story. What do you guys think?
It is curious that she has barely been present at all. I don't even think she was in episode 3. I can't even really remember much about her in episode 2. So I must have just been so far episode 1, where she is this source for the boys' legal tactical team.
And she's briefly at the movie premiere. She tries to take up that position, supplication type female position that she normally has behind Homelander, putting her elbow on his shoulder or whatever it is to be like, that's my guy, or whatever the persona is supposed to be for her. And he just walks off, kind of foretelling the stunt he's going to pull.
Yeah, and then they completely bypassed her as an option for co-captain
right.
from like an organizational level, even though she's like a veteran who's been there much longer than Starlight has. And so I was kind of curious to see what Vought is planning to do with her. Because it feels like maybe it's like an intentional pigeonholing to make her obsolete, and we'll see. Or I don't know, maybe they somehow know that she's involved and we don't know that yet.
Yeah.
You know, that she's been involved in that, because we know how expansive and complex this relationship now is between that Tactical Force Group's governing agency and Vought. So they're actually married in a way, instead of being like opposing forces like the public is supposed to believe. So who knows if they have information, and that's probably could be a reason why we're experiencing so little of her. But very interesting, because now she has no more leverage then over Homelander. As we saw in episode 3, if he said, tell Starlight to her face, and he doesn't give a fuck that that they have that video, and he'll just like destroy the world because he can. That makes me a little bit nervous about Maeve's future now. Just like being alive kind of nervous, not her career kind of way.
I guess he came to terms with like, oh, fuck it. Like, if you do this, then I'm going to do this. Was interesting. And I think it really did feel like that was it was in episode 3 where they kind of, you know, that like kicks off the season of like, okay, he is a time bomb. Like, he is just, you know, like a ticking time bomb of like what he wants to do, and he can do, like he says, whatever the fuck he wants. And yeah, it kind of got me thinking, because he's making Starlight's life a living hell, as we saw. I would think he would also want to do that with Maeve. I wonder how she's going to play into this. I mean, they did try to team up at the end of last season to kind of take him down, but like, I don't know. I feel like she has to come back in some way, because she's pretty powerful too. I don't want that to be the last that we see of her.
Me neither. Yeah, I'm interested in her or in her story because she's been there the whole time, but always holding back. And with the story, even 3 episodes in to the 3rd season here, feeling like it's at a very quick pace. I feel like, what are you holding back for now? Like, because I don't know what an end looks like for this story or this show, but this isn't not the kind of story that would just kill her and she would have never done anything, leaving her completely unfulfilled. I think the show could very well do that. But I would hate to see it happen at the same time.
Although the theme seems to be this season that people aren't holding back. So I think we're seeing people that have held back, or they're basically bottling up things like Starlight is now and some other characters. So I feel like we're going to get everyone just like going all out and trying everything. So maybe Maeve will come back guns a-blazing. Like maybe she's doing her own research and trying to figure out how to defeat Homelander, because that's the ultimate goal that everyone wants to do. Like even the powers that be probably would want to get rid of him, but they don't know how.
Well, you can't make a move until you know you can.
Yeah. So I feel like maybe that's, if she's brewing that, then that would be awesome.
Let's see. Let's move on to Mother's Milk. He is starting the show not in Butcher's group. He is divorced from his wife, living outside the family home. And we finally get a glimpse into what has been his motivating force this whole time. Why he even joined up with Butcher in the first place was, they haven't spelled it out exactly, but we've been given enough to know that his family got caught up in some action of Soldier Boys. Given all of those like headlines and clippings that he had in his little obsession area in the closet, it looks like they were more or less probably collateral damage. Soldier Boy was doing something else, and they got caught in the middle of it, and some of them died. The way that he said something about his father still had 2 living children sounds like maybe he had some siblings that didn't make it through whatever this was. That was his driving force to act against Soups. And now that Soldier Boy's background and everything is back on the table, now he's very interested in getting that all sorted out. Last season, Kat and I don't know if you know this, Inez, but Kat and I believed Mother's Milk may have been on the chopping block. Never even got close, really. really. But I was thinking he was vulnerable most of last season, because they started to tell us more that he was a family man, had a kid, trying to do all this stuff to protect them and all that kind of stuff. Do you still think he's vulnerable this season, Kat? Or maybe you think, nah, he's okay. We're maybe others that are vulnerable, but probably not him.
Well, I think if the show wants to keep things interesting, I hope everyone is vulnerable. So I feel like he would probably be one that could be on the chopping block, especially given that this story is focusing on Soldier Boy that is so connected with him. So I feel like that always puts you, it's like the TV trope. Like if you're in it, you're there. So I feel like he could be. So maybe I'll be wrong again, but I feel like he could be, just because he's so invested. He's going to leave his daughter again. His ex-wife just told him, make sure you come back to her, which is like, the words that signal you may not come back.
Exactly.
But then that would be too obvious. So maybe it's going to be another character that's more beloved. And if they do kill him, it would mean that like they're willing to kind of take out main character. He's not like a main character, but he has been there since the beginning, so it would make it more interesting. Because if they don't kill anyone that's notable in this season, I don't know, it's gonna feel a little bit like, come on guys, like what are you doing?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. They're willing to show us very vulgar graphic spectacle, but more or less the main characters have been plot armored from it.
Okay, that's very interesting though. Like I did not suspect, so I wasn't part of your guys' conversation, and I unfortunately did not get a chance to listen to the first 2 seasons of your podcast. I know, and it was on my to-do list, but you caught me when I'm out of town. I'm sorry. I was at Disneyland, guys.
It's good shit.
I know. It's on my list. I promise I'm going to go back and I'm going to be a better partner. I swear to you. But I didn't hear that. And I did not actually get any kind of vibe that he was vulnerable. Maybe it was wishful hoping, because Eminem actually, like, as I was taking mental notes, watching this to catch up in preparation for this conversation, when I watched these 1, 2, he's one of my favorites. I love him so much. He's my favorite. Okay, so there it is. Evan's my favorite character on here. And my suspicion that I had at the end of season 2 was like, I wonder if there's like some kind of like, maybe he is like a soup and like nobody knows it or something. Or like, or I don't know, like potentially some kind of connection with somebody, either himself or his family, that like actually do have like a soup power that like was never manifested or something. I don't know. Just with the kind of like the vibe I was getting from the conversations and the discovery of these different, like, you know, how they did the children and all that stuff. Anyway, so that was my theory. I've thrown that theory out since starting season 3 because now I understand like his whole thing is, because I thought, oh, what a strange name, right? Mother's Milk sounds like it could have been like we're gonna name him that, like that's gonna be his soup's name. Fucking no. But yeah, so now I understand that it's part of this like deeper story of like some deeper hurt, and we're seeing like how that really impacts him physically, mentally. I like seeing these different displays of OCD behavior. If there's any of them, out of all of them, he would be the one that has OCD. So like that makes sense to me. It's not totally out of character that he's exhibiting this kind of thing. But I am going to remove him from the chopping block potential because I cannot accept this. No, I love him so much. I would cry so badly.
You know who someone who might be on the chopping block this season is Kimiko, in that her backstory was really settled last season, and she doesn't seem to have much of a purpose this season. She even says she wants to leave. She wants to get out of the game. She wants to go with Frenchie and not do this anymore. But she's hanging out because Frenchie's still there. To me, that makes her shiny and ripe for bad things to happen to her. What do you guys think about Kimiko and her prospects this season?
You know, they have been showing her having a lot of like sad displays, right? Like she's carving fuck out of on the table. She's like wants to have a childhood and then is like super upset with herself for how things happened at the amusement park in front of those children, and how that impacts the children. And I think that theory has merit, you know, being one of these storylines of, you know, she's kind of dwindling, doesn't feel like she has much of a purpose anymore, doesn't want to have a purpose other than just be happy and exist happily. And I think that's really fair thing to want. And I agree that does sound like a great time to kill somebody in a show like this.
Right. That's only 3 days from retirement, right?
Right. You know, and then like in picture, like, okay, she's like makes some kind of crossroads and decides, yeah, you know, I found my purpose, I'm going to do this. And then, yeah, like they offer. I think it's totally possible. I really like her, but they do use her completely only as a tool. I mean, obviously they're all like there for to be a tool on this tactical team, but
Rough
it's
them
like,
up. Break my arm.
but yeah, she's literally Huey doesn't even like hang out with them, right? And he walks in and like 3 minutes in, like, here we go, I need you to break my arm. Like, okay, and then like go do it. So I can see, yeah, good theory.
I'd be sad to see her go, but there's all the narrative hallmarks of vulnerability there, I'm afraid. Her love interest, Frenchie, doesn't have a ton going on until he gets a call from Shelley, some former lover, perhaps, connected to his old life in a Russian gang. And she asks for help, and even kind of like, you want to come with me? And he's like, nah. I don't know. I'm not over. I didn't even have any like follow-up questions for Frenchie's story. Is there anything of interest to that bit? I mean, because it always seemed like Frenchie was in it for, I don't know, some kind of excitement or maybe escape from something else, which maybe that, you know, he didn't want to be with the Russian gang, and working with the CIA or Butcher's group offered him at least some kind of other life where he could do what he does, but not under the thumb of the Russian gang. But yeah, I mean, I'm not overly invested in Frenchie's part of it in this season. I would hope, you know, if he was my friend, I'd say, yeah, why not? Just take, Kimiko wants to go. You don't really have much to do here anyway. You can just go.
Yeah, they're both looking expendable, I think. They don't really have anything right now.
No.
So.
Well, I mean, can we talk about episode 1? I think Frenchie had one of the most entertaining scenes.
Yes. he had something to do there, or not really. He came into that, pun intended.
I tend to agree with you, though.
I mean, Termite's big coming out party, you mean to say?
Oh my God.
At first, when he said, like, you know, the guy was like, okay, get in there, whatever. I was like, okay. And then once he started, like, kind of feeling his nose and, like, you know, like there was something icky in there. And then I was like, oh no, what if he, like, you know, and then it happened. And I was like, oh my God. Oh.
Gross. Super gross. And do you think they had to build like a giant penis for him to climb into, or was that just a visual effect?
I mean, there had probably some slime or something. I don't know.
We're going to have to look up. I mean, the technology exists, and we've seen like similar types of apparatuses in like growing up watching like the Nickelodeon show where they had like,
slime.
you know, all that slime going through the tubes and all that stuff. Like it's not, I bet that's where they got their inspiration that they could make such a product.
Or Honey, I Shrunk the
yeah,
Kids.
I mean, so that scene, I like spent way more time than I care to admit, just like staring at a penis hole and like looking at my like pinky finger, like my fingernail, and trying to determine how tiny Termite Man like had to be to fit through said penis hole. And
So you put a lot of brain power into this.
that was a lot of like a really interesting creative headspace that this show put me in, like right at like I think this scene was like the second scene of episode 1, but still kind of in like the opener.
You know what's weird, Inez and Kat, is that we had to watch the pre-release screener, which had what I'm assuming to be very temporary effects.
Yes, that was tripping me out through these 3 episodes too. Like everything is like kind of unpolished because we've gotten like, I guess they're still finishing it. So I'm like, is that supposed to look like that? Or is this? So it's weird.
Whoa.
Yeah. And you see like the background is not done yet.
And the big question is, am I going to watch the finished penis?
Oh my God. Yeah. I was thinking that too. I was like, I want to go back and see, but I don't know if I can handle that again.
Oh man, guys. Okay, so the answer to that question for me is yes. Like I did like after that explosion happened, after the sneeze and the everything exploding, I paused it and I was in fucking shock. I was shell shocked. I was just like, had my hands on my mouth and I was just wide eyed looking at Steven, looking at the screen, looking at Steven, looking at the screen. And I was just completely taken aback by this. And I really enjoyed that this show did that for me. Like, cause I don't get that kind of experience that often. And it's so fucking bizarre. And it's not something that anybody could casually come up. And so it did make me ponder, what was the thinking room, the creative room, when all these writers and people were coming together about what is a really fucking badass, crazy, mind-blowing way to open up a season of the boys that matches the vibe of exactly what to expect to set the tone for the rest of the season. And I thought that was probably like one of the most brilliant ways to like do that. And yes, I did spend a lot of time thinking about physically, logistically, like how this like had to physically happen, because I do always think in random perspectives. Like I do a lot of intrinsic thinking, like in my body, I picture like red blood cells. Like, okay, if I'm like eating this, having this medicine and I'm feeling this way, and I'm like really intrinsically looking at like, what does it look like in my body? Like physically look like from a physiological standpoint. So
and then your eyes flick over to Steven and then you're like,
And so going to this scene, and I was like excited in like a this is so crazy kind of immersion way of like, wow, is this like what it probably does look like inside a penis hole? Like, I don't fucking know. I've never spent time thinking about it before. I'm not a man. Maybe if I was a man, I probably would have spent more time having curiosities like about that. I might actually know more about the penis if I was a man. But to me, it tickled a curiosity that I didn't know that I needed. And I loved it. I fucking loved and hated that scene.
Well, and then my husband also brought up a point of like, Well, wouldn't it like kind of hurt inside? Like, like would that even be pleasurable? But I don't know. I wouldn't know. So.
Well, now he has a possibility of like, oh, maybe it doesn't hurt if like there's a little tiny man just like caressing the inside of my penis. It might actually feel really fucking good. Like now we know that possibility exists, and we didn't know that we needed that information.
My stomach is clenching. Like it's like the size of my fist. It's like shrunk down now.
You're like Starlight holding her fist
exactly
behind her back.
Exactly.
Oh my god!
I love that we spent like a lot of time breaking down that penis explosion.
I feel like it was inevitable.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be like, who cares about the plot of the season? Like that is going to be, the talk of the social media realm. So
well, they went big in the season 2 opener with the whale crash into the beach.
Yeah,
so they had to go small.
Yeah. This is, and honestly, I thought, man, if they went this intense right now, like, is this like their best idea? Because I thought it was brilliant.
No, but then they have another one coming in the third episode.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten there yet, but yeah.
It still gets crazier. And that's like the best part of this is like they didn't even give their best foot right out of the bat. And like I think that is what makes this show so fucking fun.
Let's okay. Whew. All right, let's take a breath and scoot over to A-Train's story. Oh my goodness, I could not really be less interested in what's going on with A-Train trying to find his identity. I mean, he's only ever been an ally to our heroes out of his own convenience, out of his own self-interest. And, he's the whole reason that Huey is even in the story, from blowing up his girlfriend. So the fact that he's having this identity crisis, he can't run anymore without risking dying. It is interesting that his brother is trying to get something on track for him, whether it's a more mundane life as just a guy who might even be a coach of some sort like his brother is, or even actually acting like a hero. That part of it is a little interesting, but the rest of it, I just can't feel sorry for this guy. How do you guys feel when you see the A-Train story come on the screen?
It's kind of boring right now. I'm like, it's not as compelling. I mean, I will say like the interactions between him and Homelander, I mean, although it is not PC with like making fun of him because he's fat or like, he alludes to that because he's, can't run anymore. Although this is the show. It's like, if you're offended by that, like, I mean, that's the least offensive thing on the show.
Right. If problematic is in your normal vocabulary, this might not be a show for you.
Yeah. So like, I think we're safe. Like the people watching this are definitely of a realm that can take a joke sort of thing, and not look too much into it or know that it's a show making fun of those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was probably the most like exciting thing of like just seeing Homelander really tease him about it. And I don't know. I hope they kind of figure it out. But I mean, we were just talking about choppy block people. He is someone who, if he runs, his heart could explode. Will there be sort of maybe, since he has been kind of like a self-serving, superhero in the first 2 seasons, could this be a thing where he can kind of maybe redeem himself in a genuine way, not like the deep, that we'll get into kind of has faked, but like somewhere maybe he will have to run at some point during the show to either save himself or save somebody. His brother is now in it. His family is. So like, could that also be a stake now, or like they get his family involved where he will have to actually save someone because he loves them, and then he will go kapow if he like his heart goes. So I feel like that's also another ticking time bomb that they keep talking about. Like, when is his heart going to go? When is his heart, like if he does this, if he does this. So since there isn't much going on with him, that could be sort of the storyline for him this season.
I agree with like what we're saying. I though don't feel like he has like any really redeeming qualities about himself. My perspective so far is his purpose as a character in this season is primarily to show the kind of desperate ways that formerly like praised and loved public figures trying to stay relevant, like how with the kind of measures that they go through. And I think it's just being satirical in that kind of way of reflecting what real life kind of stuff happens. Like he's on the 7, but he's rendered pretty much useless, and he's trying to stay relevant so that they don't have a reason to replace him. He's trying to gain points with his demographic and trying to raise his demographic so that he can stay relevant. And it just kind of shows into like the kind of desperation that all of these people are trying to achieve to stay relevant and have a good life, and not that they want to be good. Not like Starlight's purpose is like very specifically like she does want to do good and help people, and that's why she was so popular, because it was believable, because it was real. I don't even know if A-Train is like capable of that kind of thing.
And I think his movie or whatever his campaign, the A-Train to Africa, I think that's supposed to be a reference to Shaft in Africa. Have you guys heard of Shaft?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you guys.
Yeah, I've heard of Shaft, but not the movie.
Okay.
I mean, not that Africa movie.
Well, back in the early 70s, there was an era of independent filmmaking called blaxploitation, and Shaft was sort of the banner carrier for that kind of movie. It featured black protagonists in black neighborhoods, stories that appealed to that demographic. Shaft was kind of held up as like a legit protagonist. He wasn't a superhero or anything. He was, as the song says, a black private dick who's a sex machine with all the chicks. It's right there in the theme song. But yeah, it was a series of movies, and the third one was Shaft in Africa. And I think that's meant to contrast. I mean, in that era, that community, I think, liked the Shaft movies. They made at least 3 of them, because Shaft in Africa was, I'm pretty sure, the third one. And I think that's meant to contrast here the borrowing what would be a familiar phrase to at least maybe older members of the universe, and kind of borrow that credibility and remind you of something that you did like.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for that context. Now I do want to like kind of go check that out so I can like experience, these scenes again with that kind of that in mind. But that's really good context. But yeah, so I feel like that's one part of what this character's purpose is. And I think the other part of it is just to kind of keep showing us like who Homelander is, how his mental state is, and how it's deteriorating, and so that we can like to find it even more believable data as to like that he really is like coming unhinged, and you believe him when he's like threatening Starlight that he will fuck up the entire earth. And I think that scene becomes more believable because you've seen him be so vicious and behind the scenes of other stuff, and a few times, more than once, they've used A-Train's character to help Homelander display that.
I think that's a good call. I mean, every one of their interactions illustrated the spiraling descent that Homelander had until his end of episode 2 breakdown, and it was all partially anyway through the comments he would make to A-Train. Another guy suffering at Homelander's hand, who the audience can't help but not care about, is the Deep.
Oh man,
Kat and I have been talking about a possible redemptive arc for the Deep, having started out his whole character's existence on the show by forcing Starlight to give him a blowjob in the Vought boardroom. Is that a redeemable place to come from? If that's your starting point, and you go through all this religious awakening that is super hard to buy as like a really, soul encountering kind of experience for him. Just the whole ironic nature of his name and that he's a super shallow guy. The question has always been, is not only can he be redeemed, but do we even care? We're still there with him. We are still wondering that with him. It doesn't matter that he is now part of the Seven again by the end of these episodes. Being a member of the Seven is hardly like a factor when it comes to making you heroic or stand-up person. So in his role on the Seven, do you suppose that he is is there as a puppet for Homelander, or is he just there mainly to intimidate Starlight just by having her abuser present constantly? It's just and Homelander having been responsible for that, his presence there. Is that really why he's there? What do you think we're up to with the Deep this season?
Yeah, I think he's only there because Homelander is so sadistic that since Starlight chose to be co-captain and has that supposed leverage, not anymore, over him, and clearly is not on his team, he is just making and everyone around him, like he's just making everyone like there are no friends there. But the Deep wanted something from him, to get back on the 7. He was willing to do anything. So he's going to be a puppet. But I think also the side thing of that is that he also puts an obvious obstacle with Starlight, makes her uncomfortable. So I think Homelander also probably thought it was like a double-edged sword. Because I think before that, like he didn't care about having the Deep on the 7. I mean, didn't in the last season, I can't remember, like it was like sort of like, no, like you're not coming back.
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason he's back, is to kind of intimidate and be just something that can kind of throw Starlight off course, which I think Homelander knows ultimately is trying to get to him and ruin what he wants, like his path to happiness in a way, I guess, whatever that is. I have never really like gagged on a show or watching a show. Like I may will stop eating if I see something gory. This one I do not like I can have calamari if it's like already in the onion ring type thing, but I cannot do, like we went to Spain recently and like the paella has the like the true one has like seafood and it has like, and I was like, oh, if it has the little octopuses in its little thing, I cannot do it. So like my husband, we didn't get it, so he was kind of bummed because he likes that seafood and he doesn't care about that. When that little Timothy like thing that looked kind of cute, and then I was like, and he puts it in his mouth and he like squishes it, I literally like almost threw up, and I was like, that has never happened. I gagged like twice and I was like, oh my god, I was just like, this is horrible.
Right. On that second one, you're like, I might lose it.
Yeah, it was like I thought it was the penis that would like throw me over the edge, but it was like exploding. But this one was like, this is disgusting. Because at the same time, I was like, first off, I would never want to eat the octopus because I've seen it and I don't want to. And then like the little eyes, and he was sad, and I was like, oh. His
tentacles touch his face. He's like, no.
Yeah. I was just like, oh. Like you said, Inez, like how can they top the penis explosion? They did with like, to me, that was like another one. I was like, I can't even imagine what's in store this season. But as far as the redemptive arc, I don't think the Deep is going to be redeemed at end. Like, to be honest, it just keeps getting worse because he's just faking his redemption. So I don't think we should even care about that. The more thing is like what he's willing to do to stay on the 7, and if that means like
eating a friend.
Gonna be, yeah. If he did that, then like Homelander's just gonna use him and abuse him.
There's no point in trying to look for any kind of redemptive arc. I feel like he did have like some genuine growth in the second season, and I do feel like his connection with like the animals and stuff is like a real genuine thing that he does care about on like an authentic level. But I think that just makes the whole scene with poor Timothy way worse, is that he does genuinely really care about Timothy. That is his friend, and he still fucking ate him just because he's that terrified of Homelander, and he's that desperate to just get to live the life of the free pass life, the get out of jail free life, that he did when he's on the 7. Honestly, like eating Timothy wasn't the worst scene for me. I think the worst scene for me was the Deep, when he's like fucking his wife and staring at a pulsating octopus on a fucking aquarium. That made
Timothy?
me fucking gag. I don't know if that was Timothy. It made me wonder if it was Timothy, because then it's like, wait, like, so you're fucking like Timothy in your head? Like, is that what fucking happened? Is that what they're like making me go through right now?
Yeah.
Is
both of those
whole,
scenes.
Yeah, and they were like really close together.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like too much. Like the penis scene in season 1, like that one didn't make me sick. Like that didn't like make me like gag or anything. That was like really, really like entertaining, thought trained stuff that went through, and I appreciated that. But this was like just fucking sick on a whole other level. Now we're talking about like pornography or be with like animals or like who knows. Now it makes me curious, like how many animals has he like raped? How many like an octopus to me like. So I eat mostly vegan, and most of it is like for health reasons, and a big part, and then another part element of it, an emotional connection that I do have with animals. And octopus are like amongst my favorite creatures on earth. And so I think that might have been like the extra sting on this, especially with like the sex scene is like, how could you guys do this to my poor octopus? Like in my head, now I know like the vulnerability and all this stuff. So that made me worse. So yeah, him being invited back to the Seven by Homelander is completely a flex from Homelander to Starlight. I don't think that Starlight is really like shaken by the Deep, because I think she's more shaken by Homelander. She has a genuine fear of him because he can like kill her. And I think like she has like confronted and established like a dominance like over the Deep in some capacity. And I don't think him coming back into it, and she's still kind of like a leadership role, is going to impact her negatively. I think it was like Homelander's like big fuck you to her, just to say that he can't. And then also, yeah, to have another tool that he can like do and say whatever he wants, and who will do and say whatever he's like demands of them.
Man, I don't care what happens to the Deep, really, overall, but the length that Homelander is willing to go through just for a petty, fuck you at Starlight is scary, because he's also an unstoppable killing machine. I mean, in the most literal sense that the show's universe can have. No one can do anything about if he does decide to go through with Armageddon. So yeah, but he's also up for playing head games about eating octopuses and stuff.
That was just, and it was like, I think you said it, like the pettiness is just like, well, like I just love him so much in the character sense of like, he's just crazy. Like I did not see when they brought out the food, I was like, okay, the lobster thing was okay, but I did not see the octopus thing coming.
Dick move, but yeah.
Yeah. I was like, of course. And you kind of don't feel sorry for the Deep. You feel more sorry for like the octopus. But yeah, it was just, I don't know. I guess when you can kill anyone at the, laser eye thing, it's like when people have it all, like they're rich and everything, but they still have issues because there's like they're bored or something, right? So I guess Homelander's in that sense, like he could kill everyone that like snaps at him. He could kill Starlight in a snap if he wanted to, but he doesn't, because I think, like you said, like the head games like turn him on more than like, just killing people. Like that would be no fun.
Another person who's deep in head games that we need to cover is Victoria, a new character that was introduced last season, is involved with that behind-the-scenes marriage that Inez mentioned earlier between Vought and the government, some kind of long game of whom we believe Stan Edgar's probably the architect. Maybe not. Maybe he's just carrying out a longer corporate plan that was always present at Vought. But let's just give Stan credit because he seems pretty smart. Is there anything that we're missing there that you guys have thought might come out still, or that we're missing with that story that we got, which is she was adopted by Stan as a teenager, raised from that point, put in a powerful position. Now there's obviously some kind of benefit that can exist between the head of an agency meant to police superpowered people and then the head of the company that produces superpowered people being family. That's, not obviously supposed to happen. What do you guys think might be the end game there? What do you think Stan's got in mind? Or is it just having that kind of insurance policy where things will never get that bad as long as she's in charge of the government agency?
It's a really good question. I think so far my interpretation of this is a way to keep like a checks and balances with like the soups that might get like out of control. Give Stanley an opportunity to have like a cleaning crew or something, like, you know, to be able to like take him out, like a legal agency that kind of gets to like take him out or whatever. And also gives the opportunity for, you know, having somebody who is a soup that's like on your side that nobody knows has that kind of power, and he knows all of that stuff. I mean, I think it's just about maximizing his like extent of power. So like by proxy, not only does he have the full like reach of what Vought does, but he now also has like a hand in like the governing body that's supposed to keep him in check. And then that's a thing. So it's just about like creating fake optics to make it seem like, oh, like they're against each other, working together against each other, whatever. And it's just any capitalism, kind of every billionaire that exists, like it's just about like expanding power and being able to keep all of their power and money.
Did you guys watch the Diabolical animated series?
No, I didn't.
There's an episode I think was written and produced by Rick and Morty producer Justin Roiland, who covers the idea of the Vought adoption home idea, and it's really spelled out there. This idea that it's been exposed in both shows that parents knowingly gave their kids the drug, the V, in hopes that they would develop superpowers, and then selfishly the parents would, you know, acquire some sort of acclaim for even just being on the posse of the superhero, right? But in some cases it doesn't work out. The power that they get sucks. And that's the point of the show, is that, or the animated episode, is that these are people with terrible powers, and the parents, for one reason or another, couldn't raise them anymore, or were not interested in raising them anymore because they had powers that were either dangerous or ugly, or because this was animated, so they could make it any kind of thing, right? When Huey went to the adoption agent or the adoption home, and there were the kids there that were acting the way they were, that clearly reminded me of that episode, of the animated episode, and put me in that headspace of, well, her parents did this to her. Her power reminds me of different comic book characters. It's not that she can blow up heads. It's that she can create small explosions. So like when she got into the fight with Tony, she couldn't really focus because she was in the middle of the fight. So her little bombs went off just kind of random places. They still hurt. They still did devastating, you know, life-ending damage, but they weren't the head blower, the head popper from last season. And I think that takes a lot of focus to get that little explosion right in the middle of the head to do that, right? Otherwise you miss and you just blow off the jaw like she did with Tony. So I think that's really her power. But you could see if you were a parent that had done that, you'd given your kid the V, and their superpowers that they can make little explosions, that might freak out a lot of parents and consider this adoption alternative as a path forward for them, and just, I don't know, try again with another kid. That's, I guess, all the background that went through my head when I was thinking about her background and how she got to be who she was. I think that's probably going to create a fairly damaged adult, regardless of having a rich adopted dad and being a congresswoman. I think she's probably going to wind up either she's going to be strong up to a point, and when she breaks, it might be bad. It might be really devastatingly bad for everybody around her.
Maybe that's not good for her daughter if that happens. But I don't know. I think you guys have interesting theories of like what the purpose is for her, and it does seem, obviously, the control, like what better way to, you know, hide in plain sight and know who they're hunting, and like, you know, but I think for me, I guess I'm a little bit more I'm thinking it's also a thing not that there's like soups that are coming out of everywhere, right? Like, randomly, it could be a way like to kind of like see if there's like any other cool powers, or like another explosion one that can be used by Vought. And so like they can make them disappear in like, oh yeah, we caught this person, but then they like take them to, Vought and train them like they did with her. And then possibly there could be maybe something where they find someone who could be, Homelander's the issue, but like another powerful, super kid that they can hone and sort of, brainwash as well. So I feel like it's a way to control the ones who are out of control and then to find the ones that could be useful as well.
Because after all, Vought's behind everything, or a Vought affiliate with Victoria.
It's like an army built in. Like they're finding the soups, and then they can either make them disappear, like we killed them, but not really, and then they go funnel into wherever they need to put them.
If there's any character that I come across that I feel like has a fair chance in taking out Homelander, it would be her first. I don't know how her explosions work. If it's something about like connecting with something like inside, like the body, and making it explode from inside out or something. I feel like she could totally do it. But now, since we know she's in cahoots with Vought, that'll never happen. Also, I don't know if this is the final season either. So I imagine if Homelander dies, it's got to be in like whatever season's the very last one of the show.
That does seem like the climax.
But anyway, it was just kind of like a curiosity, like creative train that I was on.
With all of these powers, it's not like we ever get like a dossier on who has what and to what ability. We just have to see it in action. But the show is mostly about the characters and the interpersonal relationships, and we get to see the action of the powers very infrequently. So we just have very little to go on. We know he has tough skin, maybe even unbreakable skin. But what does that mean his organs are? Are they also as tough? Or is it just, nothing ever gets through to them, so they're never really put to the test?
Yeah, I always wonder. I was wondering, like, can he even be knocked out? Like, I don't think that we've ever seen him in that kind of like vulnerable position of being knocked out. And I thought, we could just do like they did with Translucent Man, explode from the butt inwards. I digress. Who's our next character up?
I only have one more side character. She doesn't have much on-screen time. Her departure did leave me with a question. I'm talking about Stormfront. She's a fragment of her former self on life support, and it's revealed that she hideously bites her own tongue to swallow it and commit suicide. This reminded me, you guys ever watch Sons of Anarchy?
No.
Yeah.
Remember the character played by the actual guy who made up Sons of Anarchy, who was in prison, and they were leaning on him to talk. And instead of talk, he bit off his own tongue so that he couldn't talk.
Oh, yes.
It reminded me of that guy.
Hardcore.
Do you suppose that she killed herself because she couldn't stand to live like this anymore? Or do you think it was something else, something that she wanted to use her death, because her life probably couldn't amount to much in that state anymore anyway, at least not, according to her own standards. Doing that is what helped set Homelander free mentally and emotionally, as destructive as that may be for the rest of us. She didn't really give a shit about the rest of us, right? She did care about him though. So what do you guys think? Did you guys read into her suicide at all?
Yeah, actually, I think that's true, because like she loved Homelander, like actually like really loved him, like in love, and like wanted to be with him. It's that thing where, if you love someone, set them free. And in her own way, because he would come to her, I think, like, he was having rough days, he was getting through this press tour, trying to make amends, trying to be the good Homelander, because they have this like dirt on him. And then he would go to her, get the handy, and like just vent, and I think that would help him through, right? And then he would do it again every single day for like the year. And I think she realized that like, this is not the Homelander I love, like I need him to be unleashed. And so the last time when like it was his birthday, she doesn't like acknowledge him, and he's like, okay, whatever, and then you see the tear come down her eye.
Right.
And so it made sense. Like, I think she knew, like, oh, if I'm still here kind of feeding him, kind of giving him that little bit of support where like he's I'm the only one that can be here for him, so he doesn't like go off and do what he needs to do. Like, I think she totally would have done that because she was so, sadistic and crazy in her thinking, and then she loved Homelander so much. It makes total sense that she would do that because she knows like that would set him off, because then it did, and he was just like, what's the point,
And then he forced that girl to suicide herself.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was horrible.
That's a really good perspective. I think I was more like on the superficial practical part of it. Like, it's been a year that she's been in this bed, and the most that she can do is get out some shallow words and breaths, and then like have cup her hand enough to be his jerk off machine, like whenever he needed to like blow off some steam. That's a really shitty way of living. And, he's not even like entertained. Yeah. And he's not even like entertaining like what she wants him to say, right? She'll say something. He's just like, no. Like, she's like, well, for the master race or whatever. And then he like scoffs and no, and then like gets mad at her that he no longer is like, can finish. It does totally make sense, adding your perspective to the story, that she's had to listen to him vent about fake apologizing to the world about their relationship and what was really going on in the relationship. And I can definitely see how that would definitely be like a final act of kindness and sacrifice for him. Also, like, it doesn't sound like he like made her daily existence like any better.
That's true. Yeah. He's still highly selfish, even with
it's
her.
Just for him. Yeah. He goes in, I'm like, just starts venting, he doesn't like say anything, right? He just like starts like undoing himself and putting himself in her hand, and then it's her fault that like that's what got him off, was like her keeping to her agenda. I'm trying to roll with it. And then what's like ironic, right, is like he like acts so like, no, like that's not like what this is, right? So I think like he believes that he's not a Nazi kind of character, but then it's like contradictory to like everything that you see from him in his actions. Like, what was it, season 2 where he like destroyed that the guy who was blind, and that was like their top candidate, so they would be like inclusiveness of disabilities or whatever, because he had like super hearing,
yeah, right?
And he was like crushed him and incapacitated him for life, like really making him blind and deaf. Like, he's disgusted with that. Then he's like disgusted with the fact that the Starlight wanted the Silver Kincaid to be on the team, even though she did have the best numbers. And he proclaims, right, I'll never have a Muslim on this team. This is an American team or whatever. And even though she's like from the United States, and then his big saving grace where he decides to be his authentic self out there, and then they praise him for his uptick in popularity, and then even make a point of saying, amongst white males, like, your uptick is because of like white males,
and that gets him hard.
Yeah, and he gets like really excited about that, and it's like, man, like he could have been like, this is the kind of stuff that Stormfront would have loved. And he's like was disgusted about it, like when she would bring it up, but he really is like basking in that exact same agenda and just told it a different way. But I know, like you said, Stormfront was like your last one, but this conversation made me think about Eminem's ex-wife's boyfriend. As you recall, when Homelander is, first of all, this character, he seems minor right now, but I think that he's going to play an important role in like representing our ability to see how, people in powers, like words do impact their followers in the way that it does in real life. So I can see how, like, he was Homelander for his stepdaughter's, birthday party, and then he's sitting there watching Homelander give his big like speech thing on there, and you see him light up and like gravitate toward the TV, and he's like, I'm about this message. Like, I didn't take that as a like I'm shocked. This was like I'm empowered, in the same way that we saw people do that with Stormfront when Stormfront was talking in season 2. So I think that's interesting.
I missed that connection, but that's great, Inez. I think without being overly cruel or specific, they've made the character. I'm not going to say the actor, anything about the actor. I'm just saying they've made the character portray a very certain modern TV version of like an anti-masculine guy, right? Just like sweater vests and beards and big googly glasses and stuff. That's like not the I won't say toxic masculinity kind of profile that you've seen in other, lots of TV shows, but I will say it's more modern. I don't know what, in touch with his feelings kind of guy that is getting a lot more popularity with the white male characters of TV today. That's what I noticed about the guy, but then I did notice him light up with that Homelander speech. That is interesting to see that connection made him feel it just then. Good call, Inez.
That's the end of part 1. Be sure to look for part 2 for our coverage of episodes 1, 2, and 3 of season 3 of The Boys.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.
Pod Clubhouse.